It is the year 2020 and the COVID-19 virus pandemic is raging across the planet. Here in Australia, many businesses have had their doors shut by the government and many people have lost their jobs. As much as possible, people are being required to work from home or to self-isolate, as we call it, or shelter in place as it is also known. The gyms here are all closed, forcing members in many cases to set up gyms at their home. Here at White Dog Garage, we have answered a call to make V-handles or V-grips, which can be used in weight training for both T-bar rows and pull-downs. This episode is about making a wooden jig, which I then use to fabricate a bespoke V-handle, and I hope you enjoy. To help out, the client has sent me this detailed drawing of what is required. With the pandemic in full swing, masks and eye protection are popular wear at the moment, although not many people carry a tape measure and pencil as well. But first, I need to make the jig. Globalisation has fanned the pandemic, it seems, so it is probably worth mentioning my contribution in that I am here in Australia using a Chinese-made saw fitted with a Japanese-made blade to cut some New Zealand pine. The main part of the jig consists of two boards placed at right angles to each other to form the V. As well as the main boards, I cut a number of smaller pieces to use as attachment points on the jig. The two main arms of the V are at different lengths, one being the thickness of the board longer than the other. The edge of the shorter one is then placed perpendicular to one end of the longer one, and this means that when placed on a flat surface with the V pointing upwards, the centre line is at right angles to the base, which will make alignment easier to manage. Now, as I screw in the attachment points for the handle grips, you will notice two ears at the join of the main pieces. I had intended to fit a pipe centre, which is what the ears were there for. However, subsequent consultation with the client after I started revealed that the centre needed to be a flat bar. I obviously missed that feature in the client's detailed drawing. To ensure that the angle of the V remains at 90 degrees, I fit a strut to each side to hold the orientation in place. I used the 45-degree side of my combination square to set the angle of the strut and thus fix the angle of the V at 90 degrees. Fixing a piece of flat bar at the centre of the V requires the base of the attachment point to be cut at 45 degrees. So it is back to the compound miter saw, where I rotate the saw body to 45 degrees to the horizontal to cut the final piece of the puzzle come jig. Back at the bench, I remove the two ears and fit the attachment point with the 45-degree base to make a vertical mount to clamp the centre plate to. With the jig done, it is on to fabricating the V-handle, starting with the hand grips, which will be the same length as the width of the jig. The two grips are cut to length on the cold cut saw. Then I cut the centre plate. The centre plate has the corners of the bottom side cut at 45 degrees. Once the centre plate is cut out, a hole for a cable attachment is drilled using a hole saw. The actual V's are being made from round bar. Despite my good intentions to make a bar bender over the years, I still don't have one, and so I clamp one end in the vise and bend the other around, hammering it into its final shape. I've purposely made the V bars longer than intended, so with the final shape hammered out, I then cut the ends to the required length. Satisfied with the fit of the V-bars, I take the pipe grips to the lathe and proceed to knurl a grip surface onto each handle. I then move on to making end caps for the handles. I am machining these from black nylon solid round. Holding the piece between centres, I first machine the outer diameter to match that of the pipe handles. I then relocate the piece in the chuck to machine the end caps. First I machine a 45-degree bevel on the end. Leaving a short land between the bevel and the rest of the plug, I then machine a 10mm wide section down to the diameter required for an interference fit inside the pipe handles. The plastic swarf that is generated in this process often forms a ring to the side of the machine surface, and whilst it can be picked and cut away, I find the simplest method is to just run the tool across the surface, cutting it off. Finally, I use a parting tool to cut the end plug away from the stock. I don't cut all the way through, however, instead twisting off the plug just before the cut is completed. This is because as the parting tool nears the centre, the remaining material is not rigid enough to hold the plug in place, and I run the risk of ruining the whole end cap. Now I have finally reached the welding up stage. To protect the knurled areas of the handle from weld splatter, I have wrapped them in protective tape, and I am holding the assembly in place on the jig using clamps. Then it is on to tacking all the components together before removing the handle from the jig and fully welding it out. This is the handle fresh from being welded out. In use, the handle will have the V pointing down for T-bar rows and the V pointing up for pull downs. And of course now the handle will head off for paint. With the V grip back from the paint shop, it is on to fitting the end stops to the pipe handles and the job is done. Being an interference fit in the handles, a bit of massaging with a rubber hammer is required to drive them home. I hope you found this build interesting, and I look forward to you joining us for the next episode on the White Dog Garage YouTube channel. Thank you.